Hi, I'm Ren. I was born in the kind of town people only drive through on their way to somewhere more interesting. Lake Vernon, Minnesota population. A few thousand, half of whom you either share blood with or shared a sandbox with at some point. Winters were brutal, the lakes froze solid, and summers smelled like bonfires and cut grass. Back then, I thought I had a normal life. My dad taught chemistry at the local high school, the kind of teacher who wore corduroy blazers and got excited over vinegar volcanoes. My mom worked nights at the only hospital in the county. We weren't rich, but I never went to bed hungry. We had this rhythm. Dad made Saturday pancakes. Mom braided my hair before she left for her shift, and we'd all eat ice cream on the porch listening to cicadas until the mosquitoes won. I was 6 when I first believed I was loved completely. I remember one night, curled up on the porch swing between them, holding my stuffed owl. It felt like forever could be that soft. But forever ended on a night that smelled like frozen gravel and hospital soap. I had just turned 8. I woke to headlights dancing across my bedroom wall. There was knocking, loud and rushed. Then Aunt Teresa, wrapped in a giant coat, telling me to grab socks, a sweater, and my toothbrush. Your mom's at the hospital. The baby came early, she said. Her voice cracked on early. They named her June. Born 2 months premature, small as a kitten, a mess of wires and beeping machines. I wasn't allowed near her incubator. She's fragile, Mom said. Not unkind, but flat. Her eyes were pinned to some blinking screen. When I reached out to touch June's hand, Mom swatted mine away. Not cruelly, just. Like I was another risk to manage. Everything changed. Our house turned into a biohazard scene, hand sanitizer in every corner. Bleach smell sharp enough to sting your nose. Windows shut tight no matter the season. If I sneezed, out. I'd be packed off to Grandma's. At first, it felt like an adventure. Grandma's pies were heavenly, and her bookshelf was full of dusty magic. But I noticed how long I was gone, how no one seemed to miss me, how my room stopped being mine, slowly but surely, as June's toys crept into my space like ivy. She was everything. Every cough of hers sent the house into panic mode. My victories? My straight A spelling test? Barely a nod. The first time it really hit was 3rd grade. I scored 100% on my math quiz. I ran home, bouncing with pride. Mom glanced at the paper, said, "Good job," then asked Dad if he remembered to buy more humidifiers for June's room. Dad didn't even look up. "Proud of you," he muttered into his coffee. That's when it started, the shrinking. I tried harder, drew them pictures, talked about constellations I'd memorized, won a science fair, and built a replica of the Mars rover out of cardboard and scrap wire. Mom said, "That's nice, sweetheart. Can you keep it out of the living room? June needs calm." I started whispering in my own house. By the time I turned 10, I had mastered the art of invisibility. My room smelled like peppermint oil. Turns out June couldn't stand it. One small mercy. My space was my own because she physically couldn't enter it. That's where I started sketching old castles and combing through books about ancient jewelry, old things, lost things, things people used to care about but forgot. What burned worse than being ignored was the narrative they crafted. Ren's always been independent, Mom told neighbors. She just gets it. She knows her sister needs extra support. I didn't get it. I just learned not to ask. I learned that no amount of good grades, trophies, or effort could outweigh one girl born too soon. When I was 13, I took a job at a bakery on Main called Maple and Crumb. The owner, Miss Lenore, had this silver hair that looked like silk thread and a voice like honey laced with thunder. She didn't ask why a kid my age wanted to mop floors for cupcakes. She just handed me an apron and said, "People who want to work deserve a chance." That's the first time someone outside my family saw me. I cleaned, stacked pies, made coffee, and learned the scent of cinnamon before sunrise. When I got home, no one noticed I'd been gone. So long as I didn't track in bakery smells that might upset June. June never worked a day, never folded a towel, never bought her own pencils. She didn't need to. The whole world was handed to her in sterilized wrapping. She had recitals. I had library cards. She got video cameras and applause. I got silent dinners and keep it down, Ren. She's tired. At 17, I applied to 12 colleges. Quietly. In secret. I wrote essays during cupcake breaks and let Miss Lenore mark up my grammar with a red pen. I didn't ask my parents for help with fees or applications. I knew better. I filled out scholarship forms like prayers, every checkbox a quiet rebellion. Then one spring evening, while wiping sugar glaze off a counter, I got the email. Northwestern, full ride. I froze. Right there beside a tray of lemon bars, I cried for the first time in years. Because someone wanted me. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, just for me. That night, I brought the letter home. Mom said, "Congrats. Don't mention it to June, okay? She's feeling overwhelmed." I nodded, went upstairs, and slipped the letter between my sketchbooks. A week later, we threw a party for June. She came second in a school art contest. Her drawing, a purple bunny on a glittery hill. Dad framed it. "The family artist," he beamed. I looked at the bunny, then back at my untouched acceptance letter. I think that was the moment something clicked. No matter how loud I screamed in silence, they were never going to hear me. And June, no matter how average, would always be their miracle. So I made a vow that night. If they couldn't see me now, I'd become someone the whole world couldn't ignore. I chose art history. Not just because I loved it, but because I was done being written out of my own story. Every class, every lecture on Baroque rings or Renaissance crowns brought me back to those hours spent with Grandma sorting through brooches and old boxes. That tiny swan hairpin with lavender stones? I didn't know then, but it was the beginning of everything. The difference between junk and treasure, I learned, isn't in the object. It's in the eye of the one who sees it. And finally, I'd stopped letting them blind me to my own worth. College was nothing like I imagined. It was better. For the first time, I wasn't just the extra in someone else's script. No one knew about June or the peppermint oil or the way I used to hold my breath walking past my sister's room to avoid being scolded. I was just Ren Morgan, freshman art history major with a sharp eye and a chipped laptop that only booted if you angled the charger just right. I kept my world small, focused. Classes, work study, the campus museum. I didn't party, didn't date, didn't even go to those movie on the lawn nights everyone else seemed obsessed with. I liked the silence. It reminded me of how strong I'd become without applause. One professor noticed me early on, Dr. Sienna Lowry, who taught European decorative arts. She asked me after a lecture if I had a background in antiques, because apparently I'd made a few sharp observations about a Rococo pendant she showed in class. I just smiled and said, "I pay attention." She smiled back, "Well, that's rarer than gold." After that, she offered me a research position, unpaid of course, but I didn't care. I'd spent most of my life working for less than I deserved anyway. At least this time, I loved what I was doing. Weekends disappeared into university archives, cataloging obscure artisan marks and forgotten auction records. While my classmates stressed over exams and rush week drama, I was hunched over books older than my great-grandmother, tracing the stories of objects the world forgot. After graduation, I landed an internship at a small but respected jewelry appraisal firm in Chicago. No salary, just experience and subway tokens. I didn't complain. I commuted 2 hours each way and lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a shuttered Thai restaurant where the radiator hissed like a gossiping ghost. But I was exactly where I needed to be. My job was mostly administrative at first: filing, sorting pieces, photographing inventory. The older appraisers barely noticed me. One called me the girl from the college, and once mistook me for the intern delivering lunch. I smiled and kept working. I didn't need recognition. Not yet. But I was watching everything. I studied the way they examined filigree patterns, learned the difference between 19th century repousse work and a mass-produced replica, and memorized every hallmark I came across. Then came the brooch, a piece dumped in the costume pile, written off as decorative junk. But when I picked it up, something pulled at me. The design was too refined. The enameling was precise. And on the back, nearly invisible, a faded artisan mark I'd once seen in a French archive. I spent the next 48 hours buried in research, cross-referencing museum databases and auction records, even emailing a professor I hadn't spoken to in over a year. When I presented my findings, it turned out the brooch was a rare original by a French master jeweler pre-WWI. Its value? Reappraised at over $12,000. It sold at auction for more than 3 times that. That was the first time someone in the office said my name with respect. "Ren's got a good eye," they wrote in the company email. I didn't celebrate. I just went home, opened the drawer where I kept Grandma's old notes, and added a new line beneath them. That was how I kept going. Every piece I authenticated, every undervalued heirloom I re-identified, was another brick in the foundation I was quietly building. The others started sending questionable pieces my way. Half out of laziness, half out of curiosity. They called it the Wren test. I never corrected them. I just kept proving them right. I was still broke, still skipping dinners to save money, still mending the same coat I'd had since college, but I was beginning to feel like I owned something. Not wealth, not comfort, but credibility. Margaret, the senior appraiser who once forgot my name, invited me to lunch one afternoon. She sipped her tea and said, "Have you ever thought about going independent?" I blinked. "You mean on my own?" She nodded. "Most people wait until they're well connected, but I've seen you work. You don't skip steps. You trust your gut. That's rare." I laughed, more out of nerves than humor. "I can barely afford new socks." She smiled and said, "Then you're hungry enough to succeed." I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up sketching logos, writing names on a legal pad. I settled on Ash and Finch. Ash for endurance, Finch for instinct. The same bird that had nested outside my childhood window, right above the porch swing where everything once felt safe. I filed the LLC myself, rented a single room above a boarded-up bookstore in Milwaukee, painted the walls with leftover cans I found on Craigslist. My desk was a $25 flea market rescue. The chair squeaked every time I shifted. The only thing new was the microscope I splurged on a gift to myself, financed by months of bakery tips saved in a shoebox. My first client was a retired woman who thought her mother's engagement ring was glass. It wasn't. It was a rare-cut diamond from the 1920s, worth over $8,000. She cried when I told her. I didn't know how to respond, so I just poured us both a cup of tea. Word got around, slowly. A consignment shop sent over a box of mixed pieces. A law firm needed help appraising estate assets. I started charging more, not a fortune, just enough to reflect the quality of my work. I was 28 when I moved into a bigger space. A ground floor office with a glass storefront, still modest, still quiet. But it was mine. I hired my first assistant, Mira, a geology grad with a calm voice and steady hands. I taught her what no textbook could, how to listen to instinct. My client list grew. By 30, I had 3 offices across the Midwest, contracts with regional museums, and a reputation as the appraiser who saw what others overlooked. My parents? They still thought I worked at some gallery or temp office. June had changed her major 4 times by then. Mom always called me with updates, how stressed June was, how tuition was draining them. She never asked how I was doing, just if I could help out a little. I said yes. Not because I owed them anything, but because I could. I started sending $3,000 a month, quietly. Then 5, then 7, when June suddenly needed to explore her passion in New York. No one asked where the money came from. They assumed it was pity. I let them. Because they were wrong in a way that didn't hurt anymore. Not pity. Power. Power earned, not inherited. Gained quietly, used generously, but never flaunted. The best part? They still thought I was struggling, that I lived off microwave meals and took the bus everywhere. June once posted a story from her spring break in Paris, captioned manifesting a luxury life. I smiled at the irony. I'd been to that same hotel for a heritage exhibition, but I didn't post about it. Didn't need to. That's when I realized something. For all the times I had once begged to be seen, I no longer cared who was watching. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was simply unbothered. By the time I turned 31, my business wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Ash and Finch had expanded into 3 cities. Our client list included estate lawyers, collectors, private museums, and even a few discreet celebrities whose names I'll never say out loud. Every morning, I walked into my office, polished the glass counter, and breathed in the quiet satisfaction of building something with my own hands. I still lived simply. A mid-size house outside Madison, a used car I kept spotless, an old phone that worked just fine. Not because I couldn't afford more, but because none of it mattered. Flash was never my currency. Precision was. But that simplicity, that quiet, made it easier for people to keep assuming. Easier for my family to continue believing I was just scraping by. barely managing some small-town operation while their golden daughter, June, found her path in whatever trendy field she had most recently adopted. When she landed on interior design after vet school, dance therapy, and photojournalism, I didn't react. I simply adjusted the monthly transfer when my mother called again, her voice soft but practiced. She said June's new program was pricey, and my father's insurance couldn't cover extra tuition. I asked, "How much?" She said $7,000. I didn't flinch. I logged into my business account, created an automated transfer labeled family support, and said nothing else. Not once did they ask if I could afford it. Not once did they say thank you beyond a casual mention. Like I was just doing my part, like I was still a child handing over allowance money for groceries. At dinners, I smiled, listened as they praised June's progress, and debated what colors she should use in her next project. No one asked about my week. I could have told them I had just signed a contract with a national museum, or that my company was mentioned in a trade journal as one of the fastest growing appraisal firms in the Midwest. I could have mentioned the ruby necklace I authenticated, one that was later featured on the cover of a historical fashion magazine, but I didn't. I stirred my tea, nodded at the right moments, and let them talk about June's vision board. Silence had become a language I knew better than anyone, and it always said more than words ever could. But things began shifting the day June posted a picture of a new BMW sports model, captioned "Hard work pays off." I knew that car. I also knew no grad student at her level, in her circumstances, was affording that without help. That day, my mother called again, her voice light, proud even. "Did you see June's new car? She's really doing well for herself. Self-made, that one." I said nothing. I didn't remind her where every dollar had come from. I didn't mention that I paid for June's rent, tuition, and even her latest design software under miscellaneous reimbursement so it wouldn't show on her school records. I let the lie sit, but something changed in me. Not anger, just clarity. They would never see me the way they saw her, no matter what I achieved. I wasn't their pride, I was their resource. I hadn't planned to host Thanksgiving that year. Honestly, I'd been considering a quiet trip to the mountains, alone. But then Mom called again, this time softer than usual. "I'm just so tired lately. No one's really up for cooking. Everyone's looking forward to the holiday, you know how it is." I knew. I also knew that if I didn't volunteer and the dinner was a mess, the blame would somehow fall on me anyway. So I said I'd take care of it. That was the moment I decided to stop blending in and finally allow the truth to breathe. I hired a catering team from Chicago, one that specialized in private collector events. Everything from the table settings to the dessert plating was curated to match a vintage French aesthetic. No one questioned it when I told them I had a friend who owed me a favor. I arrived early, directed the team with quiet precision, and watched as every detail unfolded perfectly. My family arrived one by one, wide-eyed, murmuring admiration. My father said, "Wow, Ren, you really went all out. What's the occasion?" I smiled and said, "Just wanted something memorable." June rolled her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Over the top, as usual, she muttered to Mom, loud enough for me to hear. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The house was filled with laughter, the scent of rosemary and roasted garlic, soft jazz playing in the background. But while everyone enjoyed themselves, I went upstairs to check in on a live auction in Tokyo. A client was bidding on an early Meiji-era jewelry set. I couldn't afford distractions. I opened my laptop, logged into the authentication software, and connected with my assistant through an earpiece to monitor bidding in real time. That's when June walked in, without knocking, holding her phone. "Do you have a charger? My battery's dead." Her eyes landed on the screen and narrowed. She saw graphs, item valuations, and a bank dashboard still open from a recent transfer. "Wow," she said with a half smirk. "Working on Thanksgiving? That's cute." She didn't wait for permission. She picked up my laptop and walked out. "Hey everyone, you've got to see this. Ren's doing work stuff during dinner." I followed her calmly, but what happened next was not something I could have stopped even if I'd tried. She spun the laptop around for everyone to see. On the screen, a pending $400,000 contract, a quarterly report from Ash and Finch with multi-million-dollar revenue, and a personal account showing balances they'd never imagined I could have. Silence fell over the room. Forks froze midair. My aunt blinked like she'd seen a ghost. My father wiped sweat from his forehead. June looked stunned. "You have this kind of money, and you never told us?" she asked, her voice shaky. Mom was the first to recover. "This must be some kind of mistake. Ren, you work at what? An appraisal office?" I looked at her calmly and said, "No. I run the appraisal firm. Ash and Finch is mine. I founded it. I built everything you're seeing." My dad leaned back like he'd been hit. June's eyes filled with tears, not sadness, but disbelief. "So all this time, the money for my school, my rent, I cut her off every month for 2 years, quietly." Mom spoke again, her voice sharp, the warmth from earlier gone. "Why wouldn't you tell us? Why keep this a secret? We're your family." I stared at them all, then said the thing I had never allowed myself to say before. Because being invisible was easier than being resented. And I knew the moment you saw me clearly, it wouldn't be pride. It would be expectation. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I was done waiting to be noticed. The room erupted. Questions, accusations, disbelief. My father raised his voice for the first time in years. "We struggled for you. How could you let us suffer while sitting on millions?" I looked him in the eye and asked, "Did you ever ask how I was doing? Once, when I was working through college, when I was paying your bills, did you ever wonder what I gave up to do that?" June cried harder. "I'm your sister. I deserve to know." I nodded slowly, "And I deserve to be heard before all of this. But none of you ever listened. You all just assumed." I turned, walked to my laptop, and closed it gently. "The transfers are stopping, effective immediately." My mother gasped like I'd struck her. "You can't do that. We need you." June still has tuition left. I straightened my sleeves, looked around at the stunned faces of people who had taken so much without ever truly seeing me, and said quietly, "If the only reason you want me at the table is because of what I bring to it, then I was never really family. I was just the account that didn't speak." I picked up my keys. Not a single person stood to stop me. And for the first time in my life, I felt weightless. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't cry. I didn't even drive far. I just sat in my car at the edge of a quiet overlook where the town lights barely reached the trees. I watched the dark water move without needing anyone's permission, without asking to be admired. I let the stillness wrap around me until the only thing I could hear was my breath. I expected guilt. I waited for that old ache in my chest, the one that used to whisper, I should have kept the peace, kept quiet, kept giving. But it never came, just silence. And in that silence, I realized I hadn't burned a bridge. I had simply stopped carrying one that was never mine to begin with. The next morning, my phone lit up with notifications. 23 missed calls, 47 texts. The first few were from my mother, a roller coaster of emotions packed into badly punctuated messages. "Ren, we need to talk. You're being dramatic. This isn't like you. Then your sister's heartbroken. You humiliated us. Then call me. We love you. Please fix this." My father's messages were colder, disappointed, accusatory. "I don't know who you've become. Family doesn't turn its back. And finally, I hope all that money is worth what you've destroyed." I powered the phone off and left it face down on the kitchen counter like it might bite me if I looked at it again. Within days, the silence turned to noise. My assistant Mira flagged several spam submissions hitting our company's contact form. The senders? People with familiar last names. Some were vague things like "you should be ashamed" or "money won't buy back respect," but others were direct. One said, "It's time you learned what loyalty means." Another simply read, "Blood first. Always." I forwarded everything to Marcus, the attorney I had on retainer for high-stakes estate disputes. When I told him what was happening, he didn't blink. He opened a notepad and said, "We'll issue cease and desist letters immediately. No more phone calls, no more manipulation. You've done more than enough." I asked him to add one line to each letter. Not legal language, just human truth. Love doesn't come with invoices. He nodded without needing me to explain. Later that week, I logged into my social media account for the first time in months. Not to post, just to check. I already knew what I'd find. June had shared a photo of us from years ago, me at her 13th birthday party, holding a cupcake tray while she blew out candles. The caption read, "Not everyone with money has a heart. Some people forget where they came from." The comments were divided. Some of her friends rushed to her defense, writing things like, "You deserve better, babe," and "That's so cold. I'm sorry. Others asked questions. Is this about your sister? Didn't she pay for your school? One girl commented. So, the girl who funded your degree is the villain now. That one got deleted within an hour. I didn't reply. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone an apology for surviving a life that tried to silence me. But I did call Grandma. She was the only person I hadn't blocked. When I told her what happened, she wasn't surprised. She just let out a tired sigh, the kind that carries years of knowing but never saying. Then she said, "They didn't raise you to be selfish, Ren. They raised you to disappear. You finally decided not to. I was quiet. She wasn't. And it's about time," she added, her voice gaining that firm edge she used when someone disrespected a waitress or cut in line at the post office. I asked if she wanted to come stay with me for a few days. She said yes without asking what she should pack. The next evening, she showed up with a single suitcase and a tin of her molasses cookies. We spent hours in the living room going through a newly acquired estate collection, a mix of Swiss enamel watches, Georgian mourning rings, and a brooch shaped like a lion with sapphire eyes. She studied the pieces carefully, tracing details with her finger the way she used to show me butterflies on the porch when I was 5. I told her about my plans to move the business headquarters to a secured building with biometric entry and private vaults. She listened, then said, "They never thought you'd do any of this because they never took time to know you." She wasn't wrong. I changed all my numbers, scrubbed personal data from our systems. My receptionist was instructed not to let anyone claiming to be family into the office without an appointment. I relocated the main office to a new complex on the east side of town, sleek and secure with tinted glass and a reinforced backroom vault designed like a bank's. My new desk sat beneath a skylight, and on the shelf beside it, I placed a single object, the lavender stone swan hairpin from Grandma's jewelry box, the one I had held on to since I was a child. It wasn't the most valuable piece in the collection, not by far, but it was the first one I ever believed was worth something, just because I said so. That mattered more than gold. In the months that followed, things got quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. I heard June had paused her studies again. Mental health break, someone said in a group message I never joined. My mother stopped calling. My father stayed silent. But people talk. And in small towns, even silence echoes. Some old family friends reached out, not directly, but through online comments or passing mentions at antique fairs. "We saw your name in that article. You've done well." I always smiled politely, never explaining, never elaborating. If they cared, they would have asked years ago. Business only grew stronger. 2 new appraisal specialists joined our Denver office. A European museum reached out for a multi-year partnership. A New York fashion house requested a private authentication for a royal family's vintage set. At one point, Mira looked up from her desk and said, "Do you realize you've built something people thought was impossible?" I didn't answer. I just went back to checking gemstone cut patterns under the lamp, not because I was avoiding the moment, but because I'd already lived the moment 100 times in silence, and now I was just letting the results speak. One night, I came across a news article about rising tuition at June's design school. I didn't read it, just bookmarked it and closed the tab. There was nothing left in me that felt responsible for fixing things. I had done enough. I had given more than anyone had the right to expect. And the moment I stopped giving, they showed their true faces. That wasn't guilt I felt anymore. That was clarity. A clean, sharp kind of peace. Grandma ended up staying longer than planned. We turned the guest room into her studio space. Some mornings she baked. Other days she organized my archives, like it was a puzzle she had waited her whole life to solve. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, just sat on the back porch, drinking tea, and listening to wind move through the trees. And in that silence, I found more comfort than I ever had in years of family dinners where I was present but never seen. The final break came quietly. A certified letter mailed to my company address. It was from my father. A printed note. No signature. No return address. Just a line that said, "Don't bother coming to Christmas." I folded it once and slipped it into the folder labeled Archived Communications. Then I brewed a cup of chai, opened the ledger for a 6-piece Romanov-era diamond set, and started logging details. That was the night I realized I had finally stopped waiting for recognition. I no longer needed it. Not from them, not from anyone. Winter came early that year, the kind that coated everything in silence and forced the world to slow down. The lake behind my house froze solid by mid-November, and every morning I watched birds skitter across the glassy surface, like they'd forgotten what warmth felt like. I woke early most days, long before the sun rose, brewed black coffee, and reviewed contracts beneath soft lamplight. There was something grounding about starting each day in stillness, in knowing no one could take what I had built with their absence. Grandma stayed with me through it all, her presence a gentle rhythm in the background, baking her molasses cookies, labeling drawers with handwritten tags, reminding me that love didn't have to be loud to be real. She never asked for anything, never guilted, never lingered at the edges expecting something in return. She was the only one who'd ever loved me with no strings attached. And that was why I trusted her completely when she said, one night, as we sorted through a tray of Art Nouveau brooches, "You've stopped asking for permission. That's how I know you're finally free." Business kept growing, faster than even I had planned. At one point, we were managing 3 separate estate collections worth over $1 million each, and I was invited to speak at a private valuation conference in New York. It was the kind of event filled with old money, polished accents, and thin smiles. I wore a black blazer, minimal jewelry, and a quiet confidence I hadn't borrowed from anyone. The topic was legacy preservation, but I spoke about something different. I spoke about overlooked value, about how the pieces we dismiss too easily, the flawed diamonds, the tarnished silver, the forgotten heirlooms, are often the ones with the richest stories. People listened, really listened. Afterward, a senior director from a European art institute approached me and said, "You see what most people miss." I shook his hand and replied, "That's because I used to be the thing people missed." I didn't say it for effect. I said it because it was true. 2 months later, I opened the doors to Ash and Finch's flagship gallery in downtown Chicago. It wasn't just a workspace. It was a statement. Hardwood floors, diffused lighting, velvet-lined display cases, all arranged like a living archive of stories that once belonged to other people, but had finally found the right hands to tell them. We hosted our first private showing the following week, a quiet affair for collectors and historians. I didn't invite anyone from home. I knew better. They wouldn't have come for the right reasons. They would have stood in the back, looking for cracks, pretending it was all luck or timing or someone else's help. So I chose peace. I chose distance. And for once, I chose not to apologize for it. But silence has a way of attracting noise. A few weeks after the opening, I received a message through the gallery's general inbox. It was from one of June's former classmates, someone I'd met once during a holiday dinner. She wrote, "I thought you should know June's telling people you've been cutting her off for no reason. She said you're hoarding money and turning your back on family." I read it 3 times before deleting it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined anything. People will always rewrite stories to protect their pride. But I had stopped trying to edit mine for their comfort. I had already lived through the hardest chapters. I didn't need their permission to move on from the ones they refused to read. Still, it stung a little. Not because I cared what they believed, but because they were so comfortable twisting truth into fiction just to keep me small. That's the thing no one tells you about walking away. You expect pain, you prepare for anger, but what really hurts is the way they carry on as if your silence was proof of guilt, not survival. They build a narrative around your absence, and if you stay quiet too long, that story becomes reality for everyone else. But I didn't stay quiet for long. I decided to share something not with them, but with the world that had seen me rise. I published an article for a leading art history journal, a personal essay called "The Value of the Forgotten." In it, I wrote about growing up invisible, about learning how to see worth where others saw nothing, about how my eye for authenticity was born out of years of being treated like a ghost in my own home. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The truth was in the rhythm of every word. The response was overwhelming. Collectors, curators, even former professors reached out, some with praise, others with stories of their own. I read every message. I replied to most. But the one that hit hardest came from a stranger who simply said, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one." That message stayed with me, echoing in the quiet moments between meetings and in the spaces between archived brooches and velvet boxes. It reminded me that stories like mine weren't rare. They were just buried, like the heirlooms I built my life around, neglected, devalued, hidden until someone finally picked them up and said, "You're still worth something." Grandma cried when she read the article. Not loudly, just the soft, steady kind of tears that don't need explanations. She touched my shoulder, then said, "Now the world knows what I've known all along." I smiled, but inside something cracked gently open. A space where grief and pride had been sitting side by side for years. That night, I went to the vault and pulled out the velvet box, holding the lavender swan hairpin. I held it in my palm, watched the way it caught light under the overhead beam, and finally understood why I'd never let it go. It wasn't just a symbol of memory, it was proof. Proof that I had always known how to recognize beauty, even when no one else saw it. And now that same eye had rebuilt my entire life. A few days later, I received an invitation to speak in Paris at an international heritage conference. The email was direct. They wanted me to present on emotional resonance in valuation, the way personal histories increase the intangible worth of objects. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wonder what people might think. I didn't check my calendar for family birthdays or anniversaries. I just accepted, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't fitting my dreams around other people's expectations. I was designing my future without asking how much space I was allowed to take. On the night before the flight, I sat on the floor of my gallery, cataloging pieces for an upcoming exhibit. The room was quiet, every object around me resting in soft light. I looked at each one and thought about the hands that had once held them, the hearts that had once worn them, and the stories they had carried across time, across oceans, across loss. I realized then that I wasn't just preserving history, I was rewriting my own, one artifact at a time. I packed lightly, one suitcase, one pair of boots, one necklace from a 19th century London artisan that I knew June would have called gaudy. I smiled thinking about that because now I didn't care. Let them call it what they wanted. I knew what it was. I knew what I was. Valuable, rare, and finally seen by the only person who ever needed to see it. Paris greeted me with gray skies and the scent of rain on old stone. The streets shimmered under soft mist, like they too carried history in their bones. I checked into the hotel quietly, unpacked slowly, and hung the necklace I'd chosen over the edge of the mirror, not for display, but as a reminder. I didn't wear it for anyone but myself. The morning of the conference, I walked into the venue wearing a charcoal coat and steady silence. No entourage, no fanfare, just me, holding a folder of notes and a story that belonged to no one else. The room was filled with people who had studied objects their entire lives, people with degrees and titles and collections I'd once only read about. And yet, as I stood behind the podium and looked out over that sea of prestige, I didn't feel small, I felt ready. I opened with a simple sentence. The first valuable item I ever held was something no one else believed was worth anything. The room went still, the way it always does when truth is spoken plainly. I talked about the way forgotten heirlooms hold more than material worth, how emotional resonance carries a weight no scale can measure. I wove my experience into the research, how growing up overlooked taught me to see what others miss, how living in the shadow of someone deemed more precious gave me the instinct to spot what was quietly priceless. I didn't mention names, I didn't need to. The people in the room understood. Some nodded slowly. A few wiped away tears they probably didn't expect. When I finished, there was no explosion of applause, just silence. Deep, respectful, grounding. And that silence meant more to me than any standing ovation ever could. Later that evening, as I walked along the Seine, I thought about how far I'd come. Not in miles, in ownership of my voice, my time, my value. I had spent years trying to earn a seat at tables where I was only ever tolerated. Now I built my own, and anyone invited sat at eye level or not at all. That shift wasn't loud, it wasn't petty, it was power, quiet and unshakable. When I returned home, everything looked the same. The house, the lake, the office light that flickered twice before turning on. But I was different. Not changed like a leaf in autumn, but returned like a stone thrown far and finally settled where it belonged. I poured tea, opened my laptop, and responded to a message from the museum in Oslo. They wanted me to co-curate a jewelry exhibit centered on women artisans whose work had been lost to time. The theme was unseen hands. I said yes before I finished reading the details. Because I didn't need convincing. I didn't need to wait and weigh whether I deserved to be there. I knew I did. The gallery remained steady. New pieces came in, new staff trained. Grandma stayed on, still organizing drawers, still wearing that soft blue cardigan like armor. She started baking for clients who stopped by in person, handing them cookies like they were part of some old world ritual. They loved her. Everyone did. And I loved that the most extraordinary woman I'd ever known had become a permanent part of the space I'd built. It made everything feel whole. Then, just after the spring thaw, I received a letter in a familiar hand. June. The envelope was plain, the handwriting uneven. Inside was a single page, no return address. She wrote, "I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I thought you were just being distant, that you didn't want us. I see it now. All of it. What you did, what you gave. I was always the sinner without realizing I'd been placed there at someone else's expense. I don't know how to fix it, but I needed you to know I'm trying." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside the same drawer where I kept my first appraisal certification. I didn't call her, I didn't write back. Not because I hadn't forgiven her, but because forgiveness doesn't always look like reunions or second chances. Sometimes it's just a quiet acceptance that the people who hurt you may never heal you, and that's okay. We don't owe healing to those who watched us bleed. We owe it to ourselves, to the lives we build in the aftermath. Weeks passed. Summer came soft and green. Business surged as wedding season brought in vintage requests, family vaults, and grandmother's brooches that needed reappraising. Every piece I touched still carried weight, still told a story. But now, the difference was this. I didn't look for meaning to escape my past. I looked because I finally had the space to honor it. I had stopped running from who I was, and instead began rooting myself in who I had become. One late afternoon, I stood in the middle of the gallery alone. The lights were dim. Outside, the sun had started casting gold across the floor. I looked around at the curated cases, the soft velvet, the quiet hum of a place filled with history and purpose. And then I looked at myself, not in a mirror, but in memory. The girl who used to sit at the edge of the porch while her parents doted on someone else. The teenager who worked bakery shifts just to feel noticed. The young woman who celebrated her full scholarship alone while her sister got roses for second place. She was still here, but now she stood tall. I walked over to the personal showcase I rarely opened. Inside was the velvet box with the swan hairpin. Next to it I placed a card. White linen, no decoration. Just one line written in steady ink. For the girl they never saw, who became the woman no one could ignore. I closed the case and locked it, not to hide anything, but to preserve what mattered. Later that week, I took Grandma out for dinner, just the two of us. A quiet French bistro with pressed linens and warm light. We shared creme brulee and stories neither of us had told before. On the walk home, she slipped her hand into mine and said, "You know what I'm most proud of?" I shook my head. "That you never let them tell you who you were. That you figured it out for yourself, piece by piece." I didn't reply, I just squeezed her hand gently. Because some moments don't need words to be understood. And that was the truth of it all. I didn't win through revenge or rage. I didn't destroy anyone. I simply chose myself, over and over, until the choosing became a habit. Until the silence became peace. Until the life I built became enough. No more begging to be seen. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. No more giving without return. I had given everything once. Time, love, money. And when I stopped, I finally saw what was left. A woman with her own legacy, quiet power, and a truth no one could rewrite. This was never just about family, or money, or favoritism. It was about worth. And how sometimes the most valuable thing you'll ever appraise is your own life. Story 2. Rebecca is my name. I live and work in Chicago, and I'm 31 years old. A journey I believed would be full of affection turned out to be the cause I would never be able to view my family the same way again. The streetlights seemed to be dim, twinkling specks in the wind on a winter Saturday morning due to the heavy snowfall. At 6 a.m., I departed. My family was hosting an engagement party for my sister Caroline in a small Vermont hamlet after more than 8 hours of driving on treacherous roads. There was a neatly wrapped wedding cake box in the passenger seat, hidden away like a delicious secret. It was a two-tiered red velvet cake with sugar flowers and cream cheese icing. It was previously described by Caroline as my high school fantasy. Almost 2 weeks prior, I had placed an order for the cake from a well-known bakery, paying extra to have it created fresh that morning. I traded comfort for my sister's grin because I loved her, not because I had time to spare. I changed into heels in a toilet at a gas station while wearing a tight black dress and a beige coat. In the process, I'm doing this for Caroline because she's worth it, I reminded myself each time I glanced in the mirror. I was almost out of breath as my car pulled into the driveway of the estate where the party was being held. With bright golden lights around the trees, the mansion shone in the snowy woodland like a scene from a fairy tale. White and silver ribbons waved softly in the breeze. Caroline won't forget me after this, I recall whispering. Like a frail little prayer, the words reverberated throughout the vehicle. I gave the valet the keys. When he saw me come out with the cake box, he arched an eyebrow. "Do you handle the catering for the wedding?" he inquired, kind but aloof. I thought he was kidding and grinned with relief. "No, I'm the sister of the bride." He gave a nod, said nothing else. I entered the foyer and heard gentle violin music mingled with the aroma of vanilla candles. Oddly enough, though, nobody showed up to welcome me. Not a hug? No. How did the drive go? There were just a few visitors who gave me a cursory glance before turning away as if I were an outsider who had entered the wrong home. Grasping the cake box firmly, I proceeded into the main hall, where Caroline was standing next to her fiancé, Ethan, who was dressed in ivory satin, a face that is constantly hailed as the family pearl is framed by soft locks. Before she noticed me, she was having a great time laughing with her companions. In a moment, Caroline's smile was gone. "You came, really?" Her eyes narrowed as if she were incredulous as she asked. 8 hours in the deep snow. I came, of course. Unexpected, the first tried to speak in a light-hearted manner. The cake box was not taken by Caroline, nor did she take a step toward him. "I didn't think you'd come with the weather and all," she added. I set the box next to a platter of macarons. I'm still trying to smile. "Well," one of the bridesmaids said loudly enough, "it's your special day behind her. I take it she's not on the guest list?" Every phrase was heard by me. My heart broke. Caroline gave her a quick look, but remained silent, then turned away. She leaned in Ethan's direction and left down the corridor a few seconds later. There, amid the strangers, I stood in my wet cloak. People walked by me as if I were an odd ornament. I recognized then that I wasn't a surprise visitor. I was a name that had been crossed out for a very long time. I made the decision to locate my mom. If anyone could figure out why I came, I still wanted to think it was her if anyone saw the work I'd put in. Wearing a crimson velvet dress and a silk scarf around her neck, she stood next to the fireplace, clutching a glass of white wine as if she were a speaker about to take the stage. She put down the drink, glanced over her shoulder, and avoided eye contact as I walked up. "Rebecca." She spoke quietly, as though she was worried someone would overhear. "I didn't expect you would show up." "Why not?" I tried to sound calm as I asked. "A week ago I sent a message. I thought she would cut me off immediately and aggressively, but no one responded. Let's avoid complicating things. Caroline's day is today. Don't let it become anything else." I clutched the strap of my handbag. "What are you saying?" She let out a sigh, turned to face me, and smiled slightly and courteously. "You get a lot of attention, after all. Allow the proceedings to proceed in silence. Avoid taking center stage." I grinned, but it was a sad smile. I just made the nearly 9-hour drive through the snow to deliver Caroline's favorite cake. That may signify anything, I thought. With eyes as frigid as the winter wind, my mother murmured, "Rebecca, timing is everything when it comes to compassion." I paced the hall, her words echoing in my mind. Jazz was playing softly in the background. Like the wind, people drifted by me. Nobody inquired about my needs. Nobody inquired about my coldness. A collection of carefully selected frames of Caroline and Ethan's photos stood in the middle of the room, strolling in Central Park together. Caroline, wearing a white sweater, is clutching flowers. By the river, Ethan made a proposal while grinning. Everything is flawless and completely unrelated to me. Not a single image. I walked to the reception table to look at the seating plan and guest list. Every printed surname on ivory paper was digitized by me. Caroline, a lady our grandmother met twice at a charity dinner, had old college pals. Not me, though. I glanced at a staff worker. She gave a soft grin. "Please pardon me. Am I able to assist you?" I gestured toward the seating chart. "The bride's sister is me. My name is not visible." She carefully went over the list. "Rebecca Collins?" "Indeed." She nibbled on her lip. "I apologize. You could be an unannounced visitor." "No, I'm related." She gave a little nod and took a step back. Around me, I stood, paralyzed within. Happy greetings echoed as if no one had heard. I was falling apart. I discovered a vacant chair next to the dessert table. However, another employee came over before I could take a seat. "Apologies." Gently but forcefully, he said. "The DJ's helper is seated there." I squeezed my lips and nodded. "I get it." I then made my way to the room's darkest corner, where the laughter subsided and the lights dimmed. I poured a glass of water for myself and held it chilly in both hands. Could fill the void in my chest with water. I was able to view the slideshow on a huge screen from there. Images from Caroline's early years to the present. She won the high school dance prize, and she had ribbons in her hair, completing college, passing through Italy. Every moment was picked with care. And me. In all of them, her sister was absent, as if I had never been in her life. I felt a chill come over me. It was the recognition of what I used to call family, not the snow outside. I entered the coat room to breathe, not to remove my coat. The only place I could hide from the onslaught of far-off looks outside was a small room with dim yellow illumination and packed hangers. There was a tray of bridesmaid presents on a little side table. 10 little boxes, each with a pink ribbon wrapped around them. I looked at the names: Claire, Erica, Hannah, and Julia. Mine was absent. Not an error. They ensured it. I reached for my phone out of habit and slid onto a velvet chair nearby. The screen sprang to life. No new messages, no missed calls. Comfortably, the first opened my message app and scrolled. I became aware of it at that point. A fresh group chat. Caroline's ideal squad. I scowled. I don't recall signing up for this. Perhaps I was accidentally inserted. Julia's most recent message was sent 3 hours ago. The bridesmaid, among others. Everything is lovely and flawless, just how we had intended. There are older writings above it. Claire, there's no way she's coming. She despises crowds. Hannah, better still. The atmosphere will be more relaxed. Then I noticed it. That one broke me. Caroline. She doesn't match the stereotype. To put it simply, the list is full. It would be awkward to have her in the wedding pictures. There was a shaking head gif and a cringing emoji below. How long I stared is a mystery to me. It seemed as though each word was engraved directly into my chest. Caroline didn't simply ignore me. She intended to exclude me. The worst part is that I had no suspicions at all. With shaking hands, I slipped my phone back into my purse and exited the group chat. It's not cold. No more. I exited the coat closet. No specific destination in mind. Just trying to find a way out of those walls that were closing in. I stumbled into a small corridor that connected the staff area and kitchen. There were trays of unopened food waiting to be brought out under the soft yellow ceiling lights. I heard laughter coming from behind a cracked door just as I was about to turn around. I froze when I heard a voice I recognized. Caroline was the one. The fact that she drove all the way here still amazes me. Who does that? Then the voice of Hannah. "What would you bring on a whole road trip? A homemade cake that appears to have been purchased at a bargain store." There was a chuckle. I went cold. I held my breath. Caroline went on, her tone softer but no less abrasive. Everything would have been ideal if she hadn't arrived. I was hoping the weather would keep her away. Claire added her voice. "Maybe she would have spun out on the road or something. That way we'd have an excuse to be sad and still enjoy the peace." This time it wasn't just a laugh. It was an eruption of laughter, light, ruthless, and all too familiar. The kind of laughter I'd heard my entire childhood. Only back then I didn't know who it was aimed at. Now I did. I stepped back, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. The floor felt like it tilted, not because I lost my balance, but because the whole world had just collapsed. None of them thought I could hear. And that's what hurt the most. Because what people say behind your back, that's what they really mean. And the truth was, I had never been wanted here. I turned away. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time, I knew this much I wasn't mistaken. I wouldn't excuse them anymore. through blind hope. I had heard everything, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to forgive and return to the main hall. There was no reason to stay in a place where even breathing made my chest ache. Instead, I quietly stepped out through the side door near the kitchen, my long coat still streaked with old snow from that morning's drive. The cold wind whipped against my face like it was trying to wash away every illusion I had brought with me. But the coldest thing wasn't the weather. It was the silence from the people I once called family. I sat in my car for a long time. The engine was off, but my thoughts continued racing. My phone brightened up with a fresh message. It was from my mother, just one line. "Rebecca, don't create a scene." I gazed at the writing, mind blank above it. My prior message still sat. "Mom, I'm on my way. Hope you'll all be surprised." Marked as read. No reply. I didn't answer. I had no energy left to explain or defend something that never should have needed explanation. I just wanted to be there for my sister. I sat in that darkness until the golden lights from the estate across the road disappeared into nightfall. I didn't drive home that night. I booked a room at a cheap motel 30 minutes away. My dress was wrinkled, makeup smeared. After repeated tries not to weep, I didn't switch on the television. Social media wasn't something I checked. One breath at a time, I let the memories of the evening eat away at me as I lay there gazing at the stained ceiling. My phone was ringing when I woke up the next morning. The lack of sleep was still making my mind spin. Caroline's heavily tinted photo was the first thing I saw when I opened Instagram. With her satin dress and sparkling lights behind her, Caroline is accompanied by her bridesmaids and holds a champagne glass, similar to the wedding invitations from fairy tales. "A perfect night with all the people I love most" was the caption. I wasn't in the shot. No tag, no mention, no thank you. Not a single trace that I had ever been there. I scrolled through the comments. Caroline, the most lovely bride. Everything looks wonderful. Wish I'd been invited. No one asked about me. No one questioned about the wedding cake. About the individual who drove over 400 miles to show up, then fled without a trace. The following communication came from my cousin Julia. "I hope you realize that last night wasn't easy, Rebecca. Asking for attention was not appropriate at that party." Then, in the family group chat, my mother sent me another SMS family unit. "Collins, she's going through a difficult time. Let's wait. Avoid stoking the flames." I read it again, as though it took many readings for my brain to completely comprehend a difficult passage. The tale was being rewritten. Rebecca in a different form. Deranged. Disturbing. It's embarrassing. What I had heard behind that kitchen door went unspoken. Nobody questioned me about my silent departure. Nobody inquired about my well-being. An old friend's note. A person I hadn't spoken to in over 3 years arrived for the engagement celebration, became uncomfortable. Caroline claimed that after making a disturbance, you vanished. "Are you all okay?" I realized I hadn't just been removed from the guest list, so I didn't respond. Like I had never been the major character in anyone's recollection, only an extra readily excised to maintain the ideal image. I had been removed from the story as if my existence had been a glitch that needed to be fixed. My laptop opened, and I made a new folder called The Truth in It. I took pictures of yesterday's snow-covered driveway, the wedding cake receipt, and the unopened cake box on the kitchen counter. Although I wasn't really sure why, I took screenshots of Caroline and her friends' group chat. However, if someone ever inquires, was it truly so awful? Yes is what I want to be able to say. They will never tell you these things. I may get kicked out of the party. I may be cropped out of the pictures. However, I refuse to allow them to continue using quiet to define me. I stayed in my tiny apartment in Chicago all afternoon on Sunday. I spread out everything that people had decided to overlook on the kitchen table in the soft light from the window. The screen of my laptop was open, revealing the truth folder, where I had stored the facts that no one wanted to admit. I took a picture of the red velvet wedding cake that was still sealed in its silver box. I never read the receipt for the more than $200. I paid the bakery in advance to have it made fresh that morning. I snapped a photo in front of Caroline's mansion, still holding onto the cake like it was a priceless present, my coat soaking through and my hair disheveled from the snowstorm. When I initially opened Instagram, I uploaded a picture of the cake outside with snow all around it, and the gold ribbon contrasted with the white. "Not everything we bring is appreciated," the caption said. "That does not imply that it is worthless. The screenshot of the receipt from the email confirmation was the second post. The card states that Caroline Collins would get a 2-tiered red velvet wedding cake on Saturday morning. The third was a picture of my car's snow-covered windshield taken from inside. I arrived despite everything outside trying to stop me, which was as white as the sky itself. I disabled the comments because I didn't need permission to share my experience, not because I was afraid of controversy. After that, I checked my email. Caroline Collins, Aunt Martha, and recipient's mother, Linda Collins, talk about the wedding cake. I didn't say much. The receipt for the wedding cake I ordered, paid for, and delivered on Saturday is attached. No one ever discussed or opened the cake. I don't require gratitude. All I want is for you to realize the reality. I pushed submit after attaching the 3 pictures. In less than 5 minutes, Mom responded, "This isn't helping, Rebecca. You are exacerbating the situation." I didn't answer. I opened a fresh message, this time to Ethan, Caroline's fiancé, who worked in the PR division of Lockridge Financial. I knew one thing, but I wasn't sure if they would care. This company took reputation very seriously and avoided any personal controversies that may undermine investor trust. Not much was written by me. I just sent 2 files, including a snapshot of the Collins family group chat in which my mother referred to me as unstable, and Caroline made fun of me for making things into a tragedy. An audio clip from that evening, in which Caroline and her companions chuckled at the possibility of my being involved in an accident while traveling. The voices had a distinct theme and were strong and clear. Information that might be important to the business. Picture. No caption. No justification. I let them make the decision. Upon finishing, I shut down my laptop and fetched myself a drink of water. My hands still shaking, not because I was afraid of their reaction, but because it was my first time. I resisted. No shouting, no begging to be allowed in. Simply exposing the facts to see whether they would continue to act as though they were unaware. After several hours, my phone began to vibrate. A call from an unidentified number. "This is Lindsay from Lockridge PR, Rebecca. I appreciate you providing the information. We are examining the material and will act in accordance with corporate guidelines." The fact that they answered in a way that my own family hadn't told me was enough to let me know what was going to happen next. They were unable to bury it this time. Caroline shared a little video clip of flickering candles with lettering across the screen on her Instagram account that evening. "Someone will always find it unbearable to witness your happiness." No tags, no name. However, everyone was aware of the subject. I simply closed my phone and grinned. Since they had written the play this time and I had merely pushed back the curtain to let the audience view backstage, I didn't need to respond verbally. Monica, an old childhood friend who lived close to Caroline, texted me on Wednesday morning as I was brewing coffee. "Have you listened to the family get-together? The dinner was canceled." Ethan stated that he must reconsider everything. In the kitchen, I remained still. The tremble in my wrist was too strong for the coffee scent to mask. I was not happy. I was not offended. I simply had the impression that the correct door had finally been knocked on by the truth. Everything went according to plan for the weekend brunch at Aunt Martha's place. A small meeting to settle the dispute. Just as Mom said, reluctantly, I accepted the invitation, similar to a side dish. Only because it was already on the hotel's menu did people serve. My tardiness was 10 minutes. I would remain silent not because of traffic, but because I wanted to see everyone's faces as soon as I entered to see who was praying and who was waiting for me to speak. Wearing a cream knit dress and little makeup, Caroline sat in the middle of the long table, but it was hard to conceal the weariness beneath her mascara. There was no Ethan. Martha breathed a sigh of relief as Mom smiled stiffly. I took my designated seat at the far end of the table, next to a vase of white tulips, and nodded solemnly. As usual, Caroline was the first to speak, her voice soft and somewhat reflective. "It has been an emotional trip over the last week. I believe we've all witnessed the true power of family." All around the table, heads nodded. Everyone understood who she was referring to. After putting down my water glass and using a napkin to clean the rim, I looked up. I hesitated, but I wanted to say a few things to Caroline. "It's not just 1 minute today, Rebecca." Calm but forceful, I said. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on the stored audio clip. Caroline's smooth yet icy voice echoed. "She doesn't match the stereotype. To put it simply, the list is full. It would be difficult to have her in the wedding pictures. Then there was laughter, and then Julia's voice. On the road she may spin out. In this manner we would both have a cause for sadness and peace. Although the room was filled, there was no sound at all. Through the little speaker, just their own words were audible. Every sentence functions as a verdict. Caroline's face became white. My mother lost her temper and put down her glass. Aunt Martha put her hand over her lips. No more nods. After 10 seconds, I ended the recording. Enough. I heard that at Caroline's engagement celebration. My voice was strangely steady as I spoke. I mistakenly believed that I had brought a gift of affection, but I was really a hindrance to concealment. Caroline got to her feet. Rebecca. It was a joke. Was one interrupting a thought or a strategy all along? Nobody responded. I glanced at my mom first, then at Aunt Martha. Would any of you trust me if I didn't have that recording? My mom remained silent. Her gaze wandered. Is Ethan aware? A relative inquired, seeming uncomfortable. Caroline took a gulp. He needs time to reflect. I gave a nod. Excellent. He ought to be aware of his future spouse. I didn't hold off till I heard back. The faces that had previously turned away at the party were now observing me as if they were seeing me for the first time as I stood and carefully pulled the chair back in place. Aunt Martha trailed behind me as I left. She said, "Are you not just standing up for yourself?" as she caressed my arm. This family was reminded by you that the truth is still worthy of being heard. I simply nodded before stepping out into the brilliant morning light. The sky above was so blue it nearly ached to look at as the clouds parted, in years, for the first time. This time they had said it all, so I didn't feel the need to elaborate. It had been a week since that brunch, and my phone was still dead. No check-ins, no apologies, just a few silent comments from individuals who, like me, had previously been shunned by their families, and a few Instagram alerts from old acquaintances who liked the photo of the wedding cake I had delivered through the snowstorm. I made no attempt to contact Caroline. I had lost my anger. I simply felt as though a lengthy chapter had ended without a terrible conclusion. Resolution is not required, just finished. My phone rang on Friday night as I was folding clothes. A name that was recognized appeared on the screen. Caroline. The first paused. My hand briefly touched the decline button before coming to a standstill. At last, I placed the phone on the table, pressed the accept button, and switched it to speaker mode. Rebecca. She spoke in a raspy voice. Please, just for once, I didn't say anything, even though I know you probably don't want to hear it. I was mistaken. With every syllable sounding like it was struggling through ice water, Caroline went on. People have likened me to you my entire life. You were intelligent, self-sufficient, and never needed help, and I constantly had to put in more effort, simply to get noticed. I reclined in my chair and gazed at the ceiling. I never imagined Caroline would tell me this. I felt envious of you. She openly acknowledged that she had attended my own engagement party. I was afraid. I'm afraid of the way Ethan regarded you when you entered. Fearful of being complimented for navigating a snowstorm? I'm afraid I'll be the shadow again. I shut my eyes. The pain came back. I once wished I had heard them sooner, not because of what she said. But, Caroline replied, her voice shaking, that doesn't excuse what I did. It was cowardly and self-centered. I created you the problem by excluding you from the guest list, laughing behind your back, and then fabricating a tale. I am aware. That cannot be undone. I answered after letting out a deep breath. You're correct. It cannot be reversed. I don't want to live with those scars forever, though. A pause occurred. Then, just above a whisper, Caroline inquired, Will you pardon me? I considered it. It wasn't necessary to start again in order to forgive. It didn't entail going back to the same place. Caroline, I don't hate you. I can't go back to the way things were, I stated honestly. For both parties to evolve, some partnerships must terminate. Caroline remained silent. We simply sat there, each of us breathing on the other side of a shattered bridge. Then she bid farewell. Nor dramatic, nor crying, just a timely and satisfactory conclusion. The next day, I visited the neighborhood bakery where I had placed my order for the red velvet cake. When I walked in, the store owner recognized me and grinned. This time, what will it be? She inquired. I gave a soft grin. Only a little cake. Icing that is vanilla. Straightforward design, not a message. simply kind and truthful. I set the cake in the middle of my kitchen table that night and lighted a tiny candle, not on her birthday. For an anniversary, no. Or just to commemorate a time when I put myself before attempting to win over others. I sliced a piece of cake, poured a cup of hot tea, and sat by the window with my hand in my hand while I watched the gentle snow fall outside. Was there a draft on my phone already? I was finally prepared to publish the last message to anybody who has ever felt like the extra in their own family's narrative after making innumerable modifications. You're not incorrect. You're not overly delicate. You're only being honest. And I've never had to apologize for that. I once went through a snowstorm to give it my all, but I came away empty-handed. But now that I understand that family isn't formed by blood, I'm not regretful. Mutual choice is the foundation of it, and I have chosen myself at last. I clicked post. Just relief, no dread, no waiting. Like dropping a burden I'd been carrying for too long. I got out of bed earlier than normal the following morning, not because I'm nervous, not because of residual melancholy, simply because there was nothing left to conceal. I was surprised by how softly the winter light crept through the drapes. Still holding to the street, I stood at the kitchen window, making coffee, and gazed out at the thin layer of ice. Not much of what Caroline had said the previous evening was on my mind. I no longer had to carry it about like a wound in my mind, not because I forgot. In years, for the first time, I had the impression that my thinking could expand. Melissa, a former coworker, sent me a message a few hours later. Your post was read by me. My cousin and I experienced a similar situation. I appreciate you stating what I was unable to. Then another from a college acquaintance. You're not by yourself. It's not always safer to be with family. Messages from folks who had previously been silent when I needed to be seen flooded my email throughout the morning. Right now. In some way, my voice had made others feel heard when I stopped waiting for acceptance. It was not what I had anticipated, that so many people could hear my tale, which at one point seemed insignificant and out of place. And I came to see that tranquility isn't always achieved by quiet. It's silent. Erasure. Mom's and Caroline's quiet. From others who turned away when they noticed me sitting alone myself at that gathering. It wasn't because they were unaware of what was going on. It was as a result of their decision to ignore me, since I caused them discomfort, because I didn't match the story they were trying to tell. I had also been quiet for too long. I feared that if I raised my voice, I would be perceived as the one who caused difficulty, the overly sentimental daughter, and the one who spoiled the atmosphere. In actuality, though, so-called serenity was never intended for me. As soon as I finished speaking, I pushed post, listened to the audio, and sent the email. I stopped being the victim in other people's stories at that point. It was me that wrote it over. Being honest does not make you a horrible person. It releases you. Not everybody will comprehend. Not everybody will cheer. I was secretly unfollowed by certain family members, didn't send a message, didn't give a call. I didn't need them to, though, for the first time in my life. I knew I wasn't incorrect and didn't need anyone to tell me so. I went to the bakery that afternoon to express my gratitude to the proprietor for her unobtrusive compassion, rather than to purchase another cake. She didn't ask questions and just smiled when my own family couldn't. Mentioned just when you entered. Cake wasn't simply for celebration, I suspected. I gave a nod. On the walk home, it was the final present I gave to a door that had already closed. The snow began to fall softly and gently. Not severe, not resentful. It was as gentle as if it were covering everything with a new coat of pure white. I thought, not every storm comes to destroy, as I paused in the middle of the road and tipped my face toward the sky. To clean the skies is the sole reason some come. And me. I had experienced such a storm. I took out the old journal I had put away when I was 26 that evening. I went back to the first page I had written on. They might let me remain if I'm kind enough. With a smile, I used a blue ink pen to carefully cross out that line and then scribbled a new one directly beneath it. Nobody has the authority to exclude or keep someone if that individual has made the decision to live in their own truth. I put the diary away, switched out the lights, and left a tiny candle glowing softly in the kitchen corner. And I slept soundly for the first time in a long time. No voices ringing in my head, no jolts of awakening, no nightmares, just peace. Not from forgetting, but from letting go and confronting everything at last. There is more to Rebecca's tale than just leaving a party. It's about coming back to oneself after constantly trying to fit in with a family that never really paid attention. She mustered the strength to speak out, confront the hurt, and let go of preconceived notions. Rebecca demonstrates that the truth should always be stated, even if it is difficult to hear. And sometimes the best thing we can do to find peace is not to forgive, but to stop needing someone. What are your thoughts on Rebecca's decision? If you were excluded by your own family, would you dare to speak up? For more moving tales about life and family, leave a comment below and remember to subscribe to the channel.